Hey everybody, welcome back. I realize it's been a couple weeks since you heard from me. Had to take a little bit of a pause there just to get back onto that regular routine, get settled back into school. So last time what I left you with was I was talking about accepting limitations and kind of how hard that is to do, how hard it is to even be aware of them a lot of times. And of course, in order to accept limitations, sometimes you have to hit them. And I'd made mention of that I had some issues in Quebec after the big ride in August, and I just kind of wanted to elaborate on that. So basically, the topic for today is essentially escapism is the overarching theme, and basically, I mentioned, not having the mechanism to self-regulate and to get task overloaded, but there's kind of another side to that. And having struggled with and managed PTSD as long as I have, I've always noticed that it's the quiet times that are the worst. It's the times you're not engaged with other things. It's the times when you don't have a strong mission focus or a strong task focus, and you get inside your head. And those have always been the times I struggled the most. And, I can look back on my career and say the way I managed that most of the time was to basically focus on my career. I hid at work. Work became just this the biggest part of my life. And if we want to look at relationships and how relationships broke down and everything, I've talked about emotional numbing and all those things before, but another part of it is the simple fact that I was married to my job. That's where I would go to hide. That's where I put my focus and my energy, because it was easier. And so that in itself is a form of escapism. And I mean, even you look at the rides and the adventure travel, and I've always kind of said I did a good job for a long time of selling myself on my own bullshit. And within the last year, I've really come to recognize that, but I'm still susceptible to that shortfall, and that's exactly what happened to me this summer. So yeah, basically, I finished up the ride on the 15th of August, and I had to do some schoolwork, and I was going to go to James Bay, and I've already told that story. I don't think what I really told was exactly how things went down for that 6 days I was in Quebec. So I went to stay at Laval University. I got a room there because it was cheap. It was like 40-50 bucks a night. And I was going to stay 3 nights, bang out my homework and carry on. What I noticed while I was there was I had a hard time getting started on doing anything, and I do mean anything. Just feeling completely burned out and feeling anxious, and yeah, just basically I was in that room for what turned out to be 5 days, just vibrating, just an anxious, depressed kind of mess. And like I really just like there was no rest, there was no reprieve. I'm just sitting there, just completely absorbed in misery, to be honest. And what it really comes down to is burnout, and what it comes down to is escapism and all the mechanisms to escape being, having the time to be in my own head, and the methods I use to avoid that taking their toll. So in terms of methods, I talk about the rides, right? And I talk about, the fact that the rides have a purpose, finding purpose and passion and getting other people out and getting them engaged, and all those things are true. And, I talk about school. I'm investing in my future. I'm investing in that transition, or I'm working at that transition. So those are kind of all my justifications for doing the things I do. The adventure travel that I do on my own, it's to help clear my head. It's to help reduce stress. It's to help manage those symptoms. And those things are all absolutely true. But the downside is that they can also be used to justify escapism. And that is essentially exactly what I did this summer. And it's hard to admit it. It's hard to admit that I'm still engaging in unhealthy behaviors, but it's absolutely true. And a big part of that, of moving forward, is recognizing and admitting those things. And, you know, and I share it in the hopes that maybe it prompts somebody else to go, you know, holy shit, I do that too. And to hopefully share some insight. So basically, yeah, the adventure travel, the motorcycle rides, the schoolwork, it all has a very practical and a very real purpose and reason. But I definitely was focusing on those things and using those as a mechanism to escape being in my own head and tackling issues head on. So yeah, how did I end up in Quebec City, a vibrating mess at the end of the ride? Well, so school ended in May, and I set about getting very busy. I planned the dispatches ride that went around the St. Lawrence Seaway. Somehow, in addition to that, sorry, I got a bit of wind here. I'm just going to wait for that to pass. So somehow, in addition to that, I ended up planning 2 other charity rides, 2 smaller rides, and that was Bomb the Bruce on the 20th of July and the Blue Mountain Bomber, which took place on the 14th of September, which were both hugely successful. I'm very proud of the work that Heather from Bombshell Stellas and I did in organizing those rides. You know, brought some sponsors or some support together. Had 2 great days of riding, and everybody seemed to have really loved them. Awesome, you know, which also makes it easy to justify doing it and to say, no, this isn't escapism. This is me doing important stuff. So in addition to taking on those 2 additional rides on pretty short notice and throwing them together, I was also doing work experience running boat tours out to Long Point and Lake Erie. And, you know, that wasn't a high stress job. It wasn't something that came up every single day. I'd maybe run 1 or 2 tours a week, but it's just another thing, right? In addition to that, I decided to do 2 of my general education electives this summer, so I didn't have to do any this fall as part of school. Again, makes sense, lighten my course load when I get back into school. Between circumstances and choice, I ended up doing 2 accelerated delivery, so 7 weeks instead of essentially 15 or 14, 2 accelerated delivery general education courses, and I did them concurrently with the ride around the St. Lawrence. So essentially what I did was I task saturated myself throughout the summer when I didn't have that structure. I didn't have, you know, those mechanisms, kind of like I talked about last time, you know, as far as school and structure, to take up that time. And I pretty much had more or less complete control of my time, and I just filled it with all these tasks. And what I did was I burned myself out. And here we are. This video had been previously recorded. I didn't care for it, so I reshot it. And so this is being shot, you know, Wednesday the 25th, so yesterday. And I'm still feeling the effects of the burnout from doing that. Getting back to school was a very dynamic 3 weeks. Just did 6 days in Algonquin on a canoe trip, which was awesome, but I'm feeling that burnout. And so burnout and managing transition is, you know, it's a bad combination. So I'm right now having to be very wary of my self-care and how I approach things. So, you know, but the escapism, yeah, trying to stay out of my own head and looking at that and examining what happened this summer. You know, I've also come to the realization that I'm done school in December, and it's time to find a job. It's time to decide where I'm gonna, you know, or just decide my next course of action. Am I gonna continue to go to school? Am I gonna find a job? Am I gonna live here in Southern Ontario? Am I gonna live in the Yukon? Am I gonna live in, you know, Newfoundland? What am I gonna do? And quite frankly, it terrifies me. Part of why I left the forces was because I couldn't tolerate being posted anymore, but that also had to do with a lot of other factors. what I'm noticing on the other side, now that I have complete control over where I go and what I do, I have one cost move left. So the Canadian Forces will move me anywhere in Canada that I want to go. And the terrifying part of that is permanence. You know, I make this decision and then it feels very permanent. I know I can always move. But those mechanisms and the allotments that pay for those moves will be gone. It'll be on my own dime. So it's going to be more complicated. It's going to take more work on my part to make that happen, which is fine. It's just not what I'm used to. I was used to 23 years in the forces of a very dynamic working environment that meant I could either physically or geographically move, or I'd move between different jobs and duties. And that's been my life. My life has been basically constant change and constant motion. And what I'm having to face now is the fact that I have to start making some decisions that are quite likely gonna have more permanence. You know, those mechanisms that offer that change often aren't gonna happen. And it's terrifying. You know, and I guess maybe this is what I didn't have to deal with, you know, maybe for kids coming out of high school, you know, you have to decide what you're going to do when you grow up and where you're going to be. I never had to do that. I joined the Army, and then I just went where they sent me. And so that's different, you know. It's exciting to be plotting my own course, but it's pretty daunting. And I'm not used to having that much quiet time. Because if we look back over the last year, I've been task saturating for years, but certainly since I retired, I had about a month of really just going off the friggin' rails. I was a mess, and anybody who knew me and was close to me knew I wasn't doing well. And it was buying the bike and going on the trip that gave me that focus, and it gave me a mission, and honestly, it saved my fucking life. There's no doubt in my mind. But I came right off that ride, right into school. With no transition time, and I kind of paid the piper for that. But you know what? Christmas was rough. Jesus, I don't even remember what I did. I know I was here through Christmas, but having that time, right? And it's not structured and I don't have a plan for it. That's 2 or 3 weeks of time that it's incredibly difficult. Holiday long weekends, if I don't have a plan, I run into the same thing. So I keep coming up against it, against those quiet times and having to have a plan. But definitely in the last year, task saturation and escapism has, you know, as a coping mechanism, I've let it run a little bit wild, and I've paid for it. Honestly, the end of the ride in August, up until I got home, or until I made that decision not to go, because again, the James Bay thing, you know, it's a vacation, it's my decompression, but it's another task, and it's another, you know, it's more on the plate. And that's what I was feeling, was that anxiety and that burnout. And until I kind of let go of that task, I felt better after that. I mean, still got to work through things, but you know, it definitely struck me that, yeah, I've been task saturating. I've been doing everything I can to escape that time in my head. So I guess that's just what I wanted to share today. I know I'm not the only one who does this, and it's a tool to be sure, but like anything else, if you overuse it, it becomes unhealthy. And I've definitely had some unhealthy habits in the last year with regards to that. I mean, as far as performance goes, and if you look at that outward appearance, and this has kind of been my whole career, you know, since I was diagnosed in 2001, 2002, you know, I was a performer. I'm setting them up and knocking them down constantly. And it's easy to project the image that, yeah, I'm fine, everything's cool. The truth is I'm not. I struggle every friggin' day. Every morning getting up and feeling overwhelmed because I've taken on too much, and I still do it, you know, and I'm trying to be very, very cautious and aware of that. But yeah, this last year I've definitely let that progress to unhealthy levels, and particularly in the summer. I knew that time was going to be open, and I knew that time would be difficult, so I set up very aggressively filling that time and structuring that time, and I really overdid it. But like everything else, it's part of the journey, and it's part of, you know, that new awareness of what I'm doing and how, and you know, as much as it sucks to go through it, it's encouraging to recognize those traits or recognize those patterns and start to work on them. So yeah, that's that's my guilty admission of the day. You know, terrified of that permanence, terrified of what happens when I stop moving, and basically task loading, and to the point where I don't have to think about it because I'm always in motion. So it's definitely something I've got to rein in. I've got to take that coping mechanism back to a point where it's a tool and it's not a crutch, and it's not an avenue to other problems, which it has been. It was last year when I came off the ride. It was definitely this year. This year's probably the worst I've ever experienced it, or it's the most I've been aware of it, because other things are starting to, you know, other things have come to my attention that allow me to kind of examine it in a different way. You know, for a long time, it was just, yeah, look at all the things I'm doing. I'm fine. I can do all these things. And this is what I'm projecting to the people around me. And this is what I'm selling to myself to convince myself that I'm okay. You know, and it's total escapism. It's total denial of, you know, the injury and the limitations, and it's absolutely contrary to self-care. So that's what I wanted to share today. I hope that helps some folks. Maybe it helps some folks who are close to me who've kind of wondered why I am the way I am and why I do the things I do, to say, okay, I get that now, you know. That's a big part of sharing all this too, is, you know, I realize that people around me, you know, they internalize what I do and the way things go, and they wonder, okay, is this me? Am I the reason he doesn't want to engage? Am I the reason he's distant? Am I, you know, all those things? And it's, no, it's entirely me. And I'm just going through the steps to figure all those things out. So, you know, I'm excited for that future. I'm excited to plot my own course. I'm excited for the fact that I can choose any direction I want. But yeah, it's a little bit frightening after living within that structure for so long, knowing that, yeah, there's all that uncertainty of what's going to happen, but it still happens within the bubble. And it's always, you always know, like, I'm going to go do this for 2 or 3 years, 5 years maybe, and then I'm going to go on to something else. And I'm going to learn something new, and I'm going to do something new, and I'm going to be distracted in new ways. So yeah, that's it for today, guys. If you know, you got any comments or insights, feel free to share them. Still looking to do interviews. If you're a veteran or first responder and you have a story to tell, your peers need to hear it from you. They don't, it could be my story. It could be the same as my story, but your voice is going to carry in a different way than mine does, and as well it should. Get in touch. You know, I want to take this opportunity right now to throw out a big thank you to Mission Cycle in Angus and Bombshell Stella's, of course, for Blue Mountain Bomber. It was a huge success. We finished up on Base Borden, which is where I retired. It was different to be there, for real, but you know, we had a great day of riding. There were some planning issues and definitely some things going on with the route that I wasn't happy with. And we ended up having to change the route kind of mid-ride. And you know what, to all the participants, everybody who came out, everybody just took that in stride. And, you know, as the organizer, I'm kind of worried, like, oh, you know, this isn't good. But, you know, everybody was just like, nah, man, this is great. We enjoyed the ride. So I want to thank everybody who came out to support us, everybody who came out to participate. And, you know, it seems everybody wants to do that again next year. So that's certainly the intention. We'll be looking at setting that up for you again next year. All right, guys, I will leave you with that. Take care of yourselves this week. Take care of each other. Check on your buddies. Reach out if you need help. Reach in if you feel like you see somebody and you don't know how they're doing. You know, get in touch. Reach out to them. It's amazing what can happen when you do. All right, take care.